Hey friends, Damron here. Today I want to talk about unveiling the true causes of adrenal fatigue. If you're struggling with these sets of symptoms, which we'll talk about in this video is for you to get to the bottom of what you're experiencing. If you have not hit the subscribe button yet, hit that button to be notified anytime I post new content related to women's health, hormones, or holistic health. Adrenal fatigue we've talked about this a lot on this channel in several different videos, which I'll link below, but adrenal fatigue is really a set of symptoms. It is a non-specific set of symptoms like fatigue, maybe you're feeling tired but wired, maybe you're feeling more like your immune system isn't so great, maybe you're noticing sleep disturbances, anxiety, irritability, feeling snappy all the time, like your startle reflex is really high. Maybe you're noticing that you are just so groggy after you sleep for a normal amount of time. And these are different symptoms of both high and low cortisol, which can be definitely indicative of some adrenal issues. I want to make this abundantly clear that adrenal fatigue is kind of a buzzword right now, and a lot of Western doctors don't fully buy into this diagnosis. It's not a widely accepted one, but I don't really care what you call it. The mechanism of what's happening is truly how things work with your brain to your body connection, which we'll talk about what that looks like here in just a second. But a lot of other practitioners might call it HPA axis dysfunction, mind-body disorder, chronic stress symptoms, whatever you want to call it is fine with me. Your adrenals don't really get fatigued to the point that they are unable to produce cortisol unless you have something called Addison's disease, which is actual adrenal insufficiency. So I do want to make that abundantly clear that if you go to your PCP, your endocrinologist, your whatever kind of Western medicine doctor, they're not going to accept this diagnosis. However, we know as women and men that when we have a lot of these symptoms that I'm talking about, they get very misdiagnosed or just kind of thrown under the table as like, well, you're fine, your labs all look great. You may be dealing with stress or motherhood or being a woman, perimenopause. You might be dealing with this is just kind of what it is for you when there's nothing wrong on your labs. So I do want to kind of give that out there that we don't have to settle for these symptoms. I've personally struggled with this in my own life and been kind of in that same boat where I was, went to my PCP and really got not a lot of answers, not a lot of direction in how to kind of heal these things going forward. So we know that our stress response can make our body really compensate in a lot of different areas, and that can cause a lot of different symptoms. When we are stressed, your brain is constantly scanning your environment for different threats, dangers, scary stuff, things that we need to be on high alert for. And then when it finds something, and that might be being chased by a bear, it might be a car accident, it might be a burning building, but it also can be things like the urgency culture, being type A, perfectionistic, people-pleasing, lack of boundaries, toxic relationships, being a lot of pressure on yourself. Like any of these things can also be detected to your brain as very scary, kind of stressful situations. So when that happens, your brain is like, okay, she might need a little bit of help, or he might need a little bit of help coping here. So let's go ahead and give her a little bit of adrenaline, cortisol, and some of the stress chemicals that we have to help us cope with life better. And when that happens, your brain says, okay, adrenals, time for you to get going and produce these chemicals to really, help. And so when your body does that, you've heard of the fight or flight response plenty of times before, and different things happen. So your pupils get dilated, different parts of our brain shut down, and different parts get activated. So for example, our prefrontal cortex is part of your emotional regulation, logical thinking, that actually gets turned off. And over chronic stress, parts of our brain called our hippocampus is also responsible for memory, word recall, executive functioning skills. These types of things, actually they've studied it can start to shrink. So we can tell that there are different changes that happen in our brain under chronic stress, and there are different changes systemically that occur from chronic stress. So things like immune system function gets depleted. You may know that when you're stressed and run down, feel depleted, that you come down with a cold or you get sick or get strep throat or something like that. Your immune defense is definitely down. You may also notice that your digestive system is off, right? Maybe you're not digesting food quite as well. Maybe you're bloated and gassy. Maybe your bowel movements are different. Those things can also be changed through the stress response. Inflammatory responses can change. Neurotransmitters can change. Our sex hormones can change and be depleted or thrown off in different directions. Sleep, mood, hunger, energy, all of these things, our mineral balance, all of these things can be changed when our body is under chronic stress, which is where these chronic kind of systemic symptoms start to occur from. Today, I want to talk about the triggers for adrenal fatigue. A lot of people are like, yes, I'm feeling sluggish and I can't sleep well. I'm feeling tired all the time. I'm feeling tired but wired. My mood is off. Just don't feel quite like myself. My hunger, I'm gaining weight. My periods aren't quite as good. My digestion might not be as good. My immune system. We all know people, maybe it's you, that just feel this like laundry list of different symptoms, just don't feel like themselves. And like I mentioned before, lab tests are all normal. You get the kind of green light for health from your PCP or OBGYN, and you're kind of just like, well, I don't know. You kind of have to throw up your hands, right? But I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. There's actually a reason for this, which I, by the way, have a brand new free training called How to Increase Your Energy and Have Fewer Mood Swings by Balancing Your Hormones without adding into your already too full plate. And it talks about these things. It talks about what your doctor might be missing, why you don't have to settle for mood swings and energy crashes, why there's a reason behind your hormonal imbalance symptoms. So go check that out. I'll leave the link in the description below, but it is at alliedamron.com/training, and you will get way more information about why these things are actually occurring as well in that training video. So I want to talk about first, we can't ignore the mind-body connection. This is quite literally the mind-body connection is your stress response in your nervous system. When your nervous system is dysregulated, it's going to cause the symptoms that I said, as well as things like, you may have noticed that like when you're sitting there, you start to like grab your phone and like scroll, or when you're watching TV, you have a hard time just sitting there. When you have a hard time being bored, you have a hard time with not being productive. Those are all kinds of signs that your nervous system might be a little bit dysregulated, and mostly due to the stress response. So one thing that I recommend for this is we need to focus there first. That is the most important aspect of adrenal fatigue stuff, is the thoughts that we have are the ones that are dictating the response of our nervous system. And so if our thoughts are, consistently catastrophic, we're trying to predict the future, we're mind reading other people, trying to think about like ruminating on what other people are thinking about us, those types of things, the all or nothing, like black and white type mindset. These are all reasons that our brain can kind of stay in this hypervigilant state and go into the fight or flight response much more often than we might want it to. So I think doing an inventory on that first, working through perfectionism, people-pleasing type A, putting a lot of pressure on yourself, your need for like utter productivity all the time, that puts a lot of stress and strain on that nervous system, which is what I believe a lot of these symptoms are made of, and like the big driver of them. So this might be a work of a therapist. There's a lot of like free resources and things like that. I certainly have gone through this in my own life where I've struggled with just about every single one of those things, to be really honest. And I was a pretty anxious kid, and that yielded itself into being a fairly anxious adult, especially after I went through some fairly significant trauma when I was about 19 years old. So that's sort of the first step here, is I always tell my patients to do one of two things, depending on kind of what's going on. So the first thing is to make a list of what is making life hard. So if you're feeling constantly like you're not really enjoying your life, you're kind of like in that rat race, that grind all the time, you're dreading certain things in your life or certain times each day, make a list of just every single thing that you can think of that you're tolerating that's making your life just hard, roadblocks that you're facing. And that can be really helpful at being able to actually confront those things, because most of us are kind of on autopilot and we don't necessarily understand that we have way more power and control over our life than we think. we sort of just succumb to this is what life is, and we just put our head down on autopilot and keep plowing forward, like it or not. But for example, in my life, the mornings were horrible. My kids and I were constantly rushing, constantly fighting, constantly yelling, it just wasn't a good time of the day. They were frustrated, they were tired, I got frustrated at them, and it just created a lot of chaos. And so, I realized one day that was the start of the day, right? So that kind of just set the tone for the day. I felt like I had run a marathon. I always try to get my kids off to school in a fairly good mood. And so that took a lot of kind of walking back and a lot of extra effort of the things that had happened previously. And so I realized that time of the day really needed work. And so one thing that I noticed was my expectations of my kids were too high. I expected them to be able to get dressed, eat the breakfast that I had set out for them by themselves, while I also simultaneously got myself ready. And my kids are, at the time, they're probably 9 and 6. They're a little older now, but at that point, that's about the age. And I just assumed that why can't you just I get you up, you get dressed, I make you breakfast, you eat your breakfast, and then we'll meet and get ready and go in the car. That was an unrealistic expectation for my family, at least. I don't know about yours, but my family for sure at that age. And so what I realized was I actually need to suck it up a little bit and wake up a little bit earlier, get myself ready by 7 a.m. so that I can make between 7 and 7:45 all about getting my kids up, ready, kind of making sure that they're on task instead of assuming they are and then being behind the 8 ball and being like, oh my God, I thought you were going to eat breakfast. And so I realized that was a time in all of our days that we were going into a very stressy place, a lot of fight or flight, a lot of, just kind of freaking out from all three of us. And so what I realized was when I was ready myself by 7 a.m. and had kind of my morning routine of working out and all of that done by then, things went much smoother. I had to just take the expectation out that I could kind of multitask and that they could also, and just realize that nope, I have to be very diligent and kind of follow them around in the morning and make sure they're on task. And it's, maybe not my favorite thing, but it definitely makes the mornings go much smoother. And I actually get a little bit more peace to my own day, and I'm not feeling as rushed or stressed either. So not every day is perfect for sure, but that was just an example of something in my own life that I really recognized was just not setting us up for success, not starting the day out correctly. I also, through that situation, realized that as much as we could possibly do the night before, we did. Packed the water bottles, the lunches, the backpacks. My little one sometimes even gets dressed before bed because he just hates getting dressed in the morning. And, just doing as many things as possible the night before also made a huge difference. So that's kind of tip number one is if you're feeling like there's situations in your own life that just feel hard, feel resistant every single day, and you just have to kind of struggle through them, write that out and try to figure out what part of that is the problem for you, and see if we can sort of brainstorm some solutions to make that part of your day or that part of your life go a little bit more smooth and kind of keep you out of that fight or flight response and into a more calm state. The second thing that I recommend to my patients is really paying attention to our thoughts. So as an anxious person, I have gotten much better. I feel really good about it right now, but I was previously a very anxious person. I've talked about my own struggle with health anxiety in the past, and that was a true, real struggle for me. And so every single symptom that I had or weird sensation in my body, my brain would go into kind of these catastrophic thoughts. And I didn't really, I went from 0 to 60 instead of this whole range of things that are probably benign, not a big deal for this symptom. I went to the worst case scenario. So one thing that I was taught that was immensely helpful for me was to actually call out the fact that these thoughts I was having, these catastrophic thoughts, were in fact part of the anxiety, part of just catastrophic thinking. They weren't true. I didn't have to buy into them and believe them. They weren't based on facts. And once I called that out, it actually helped me take my power back. So I tell my patients now that when we are feeling this way or constantly in this kind of place, when this is happening, to kind of think about the thoughts that you're telling yourself and what you're buying into, and call them out if they're not helping you. They're kind of like little brain glitches. So things like mind reading. You're telling yourself, oh my gosh, this person's going to be so mad at me. This person hates me. This person thinks this about me. We actually can't mind read, right? And so we don't know if that's actually based on a fact or not. Same thing with future telling. We then tend to want to predict all the future events, especially as a more anxious person. It's part of our safety mechanism. And so we're constantly trying to predict the future or catastrophize different things. So calling out, okay, I actually don't have this crystal ball that I think I do. I, don't have the ability to do that. So I probably don't need to buy into this thought about the future. The same thing with the all or nothing mindset. A lot of my patients come to me with wanting to give up sugar 100% or needing to get back on the wagon for their diet or back on the horse or back on track. A lot of food and diet mentality is based on this black or white, all or nothing thinking. And so I always recommend doing a little bit more of like permission-based eating and calling that out too, of like, if you're saying, oh my gosh, I need to eliminate sugar 100%, and there's not really a lot of evidence around that. I'm not a big fan, if you've followed me for a while, I'm not a big fan of black and white thinking, all or nothing mindset. I think there's a lot more gray area here that maybe we could reduce sugar or reduce alcohol or get more of protein or something like that. But I don't think that we need to put this like strong language with this all or nothing thinking with that. And so that's another area that I tell my own patients to really call that out and determine if that's true. Because if you're saying, oh my God, I need to eliminate sugar or eliminate this or, be 100% here, you're kind of telling your brain, you're giving your brain the message that that thing is really dangerous, scary, and threatening, which again, part of the fight or flight response is that we actually want to reduce the amount of fear, dangers, and threats in our brain, and remind our brain that our world that we're living in is actually a safe place. So those are huge things and huge triggers, in my opinion, of adrenal fatigue that we really want to look at. Other, triggers for adrenal fatigue can be like lower hanging fruit, things like intermittent fasting. If you're somebody who has a lot of stress in their life from like the stuff we've been talking about in this video, intermittent fasting is probably not going to be the best strategy for you, of fasting longer than about 14, 15 hours. Because that's also a danger. Your brain's like, hey, where's the food? Where's the food? We don't have food. We need glucose for this, our body to function right. And so it flips over to burning fat, which is everyone's favorite thing, but it's a very expensive form of energy and it creates a lot of stress in a lot of women. So I've had a lot of women over the last 6 years who have fasted. That's about when that strategy became a little bit more popular, I would say. And started to notice that like their hunger was really out of control, their cravings, their mood, their sleep, their energy levels, periods started to get different, started to notice symptoms. And so that's one thing with nutrition. Nutrition can definitely impact your adrenals. You want to make sure that you're following my kind of signature framework of protein, fat, fiber. That is the most balanced way to eat to support your blood sugar and your adrenal glands. And, just eat in regular intervals, pay attention to your hunger scale. If you're feeling ravenous, you probably waited a little bit too long and could serve yourself by eating a little bit more regular, but also getting too full. So under eating and overeating both are stressors for the adrenal glands. Same with exercise. Under exercising and over exercising both can be stressors. And this becomes an exercise in mindfulness and what is serving your own body. I have this conversation a lot with patients about paying attention again to those thoughts and determining if these thoughts are based on reality, facts, or if they're based on speculation, or if your thoughts that are guiding you are based on self-compassion, self-love, and mindfulness, or if they're based on fear. So there's a lot of nuances there. And I think that just being able to sort of decipher which one's which is going to help serve you as well, because we don't always want to buy into our fearful thoughts. Fear is not always the best indicator in what we should be doing in reality, because our brain can get faulty signals, right? So for me, one of my own faulty signals was at a point being scared to fly. I was terrified to go in airplanes, and that was obviously, airplane travel is a fairly safe form of travel. In fact, it's the most safe form of travel, and I know that logically, but every time I would sit on a plane, my brain would go into this fight or flight and be like, run, get out of here, this is dangerous. And that was just kind of like a faulty signal that my own brain got at some point in my life. And I needed to kind of work through that and relearn and teach my brain that air travel was in fact a safe thing, and that it didn't need to go into this fight or flight response when I was sitting on an airplane. So that was just like one example in my own life that I've learned, and it can go into many, many other examples in other people's lives that I've learned through my patients. So these are definitely some big triggers for a lot of people who are struggling with like these stress related symptoms and illnesses that we hear about rampantly every single day. And I think that you would be amazed just how many symptoms, illnesses, chronic disease, etc., are in fact due by a dysregulated nervous system. So in my opinion, this is one of the best work that we can do for ourselves. It's difficult for sure. It can be hard and kind of tedious, but it really does. I can't tell you enough about how well it serves you in the long term to take control over your thoughts, your mental health, your nervous system, mindfulness, being present. Like all of those things have just immense benefits for your mind and your body. So I hope you guys found this helpful. Like I said, if you want more details about this and why you're struggling with symptoms, what's happening, go to my free training, like I mentioned, at alliedamron.com/training. It's free on demand. You can listen to it while you're driving the kids around or cooking dinner, doing laundry, whatever. And it gives you just so much more information and so many light bulb moments of, okay, this is what's actually happening. So go check that out. I would love for you to, and I'll leave that link in the description below. Also, if you have not subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that button to be notified anytime I post new content related to women's health, hormones, and holistic health. I'll see you guys in the next one.